This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's podcast episode 327, and for this GABF Gold episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Rob Malad of Metazoa in Indianapolis, Indiana. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Hey, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
After you won a gold medal at GABF, that Saturday night, we all ended up back at Bierstadt and drinking some tiki drinks. We were hanging out for a little while. We talked about getting you on the podcast. And of course, here you are. Of course, and I have been sleeping on Metazoa. I shouldn't say sleeping. Craft Beer and Brewing has rated Metazoa beers over the year. Hopopotamus IPA scored a 97 with our blind judges. Unicorn Splash Brute IPA, thrown back away, scored a 95 with our blind judges. You've got a whole heap of GABF and World Beer Cup medals for Metazoa. And here you are. This year you won a gold medal for William Walrus, a Scottish ale, which you made in a very unusual way, a double decocted Scottish ale. We're going to talk about the weird and wonky ways that you've tackled Scottish ales. Maybe we'll also talk about some of your other gold medal winning beers in the past. Before we do that, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years. They know brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, nor do they. G&D uses quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. With 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need, providing you with the peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. Also, this episode is brought to you by our friends at BSG, who invite you to experience one of the newest hops from their Hop Solutions line, HS Grove. Developed for hop-forward beer styles, HS Grove boasts incredible biotransformation qualities, giving you the power to transform your next IPA into a stone fruit powerhouse. Choose HS Grove for West Coast IPA, New England IPA, Double IPA, American Pale Ale, or any beer style where delicious, fresh fruit aromatics are desired. Visit bsgcraftbrewing.com to learn more. And if you hear Old Orchard mentioned in the brewing community, don't be surprised. The flavored craft juice concentrate blends from Old Orchard have shipped to over 46 states. Their new brewing customers often mention discovering Old Orchard through the word-of-mouth recommendation of another brewer. To join the core of Old Orchard's brewing community, learn more at oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Rob, let's talk about a little bit of brewing history. Walk me through your arc in brewing and what led you into this position. It's head brewer for Metazoa, or is it director of brewing ops?
Director of brewing operations.
Director of brewing ops. I was 50-50 on that one, and I failed.
Yeah, that's all right. So I got started a little over a decade ago at Sun King, just right up the road from us. Spent a good amount of time there sort of doing anything. I mean, I was 22 years old, fresh out of the military, and got my first full-time opportunity there. That was back in the days of everybody starts in the tap room. It was a production-only brewery at the time, so everybody starts in the tap room slinging growlers, like by the hundreds. It was $5 Friday growler fills. Anybody in Indianapolis would tell you that it was complete mayhem, but was there during their sort of rapid growth period, so it was pretty wild. Even there, I started, I think they're year 3, and in my 4 years there, we more than doubled in size. Pretty insane, but did everything there from doing deliveries to working the canning line, filling kegs, washing kegs, you name it. Eventually up to assistant brewer there. I moved, kind of hit my ceiling there, moved to a brewery in Columbus, Ohio, now defunct, called Kindred. Worked with some really awesome people there, but I met my wife while I was living there and moved back to Indianapolis to work at Flick's Brewhouse up on the north side of Indianapolis there. That was really my first foray into like a head brewer role, really working on like recipe development and things like that. I owe a great deal of credit and to them for really giving me a chance. But unfortunately, that was a movie theater and brew pub. Really cool concept. It was really great. Again, it was good because it was a movie theater first. So if I made beer that wasn't awesome, it was a safe place to fall on your face, if you will. And I made plenty of beers that were not awesome while I was figuring it out. But being a movie theater during COVID, they were, of course, the first on the chopping block. So we all got furloughed there, and was very fortunate to end up at Metazoa just 6 or 8 weeks sort of after, sometime in May, after that, March 16th, I believe, D-Day of 2020. So, yep. And then been here for now, 3.5 years.
Cool. So talk to me about the Metazoa approach to brewing. What's the general philosophy, and what do you all, what kind of framework do you put around the brewing program at Metazoa?
Well, it's a balance of, so we're a production brewery, but we also have a high volume tap room near East Side downtown Indianapolis. So it's a balance between what we do for tap room and what we do for distro, right? So for distro, that's my primary focus. That's still at this point probably 75% of what we do, and we'll continue to grow as we grow. Obviously, those numbers get even more skewed. So my approach with and our approach with the production side and distro side is always about balance and drinkability. I believe in brewing high volume drinking brands. So our number one beer, which is about 50% of our overall production, is Hopopotamus, our house IPA. It's dry, moderately restrained bitterness. It's something that's designed to be drank in volume because we need that throughput. We're big pale lager,
Citra Mosaic West Coast IPA.
Absolutely, Citra Mosaic, Centennial. We kind of on the third primary hop that we kind of change those around a little bit. To be honest with you, we find ourselves in a lot of production breweries position right now where we're long on contracts. We work through that sort of third and fourth hop and that accent hop mostly, and we work through what we need to work through in contracts. So there's a lot of Centennial, Simcoe, Strata are the primary ones in that, unless you drink it every day and you really pay attention to it, I doubt that you would notice a difference, as it's very highly Citra and Mosaic forward. But on the tap room side, our brewing approach is a little bit different. We have a lot of young 20-somethings. Our tap room is 21 and up. It's a dog park and brewery, so very animal friendly. In the state of Indiana, that means you can't have food if you allow animals on the premise, and if you don't have food, that means you can't have people under 21. So a lot of young working professionals, which means a lot of light beer and fruit beer, and specifically seltzer. We have a cherry limeade seltzer that's our number one selling product pretty much every week in our tap room.
Got to make the people happy.
Absolutely.
Cool. So where do you spend, where does a lot of the kind of R&D and innovation focus then go for Metazoa? What do you guys spend your time kind of stretching on?
For me, it's lager. For most of the brewers, it's lager. That's what we like to do. We got a new production facility built out about 1.5 years ago now. So we're set up with a 5 vessels system from Specific Mechanical. We've got lagering tanks. We've got space to do all of that. So that really is the focus for us, because that's what we enjoy making. It's what we enjoy drinking. We did not have the ability, basically due to time and production capacity constraints before, to do lagers. So it's very much something that we've leaned into. Always IPAs. Those are just, again, it's pale lager and West Coast IPA are the big ones for us. But we mess around on the hop front. We, fruit beers. It's fun to play with. Fruit beers are never my favorite to drink, but they're some of my favorite to make. And our tap room clientele enjoys them. It's always good when sort of the arrows cross between what piques our interest and what piques our guests' interest. So fruit beer is often falls on that space, and we mess with interesting fruits and stuff like that. So we bounce around. We have 24 draft lines, so we bounce around a lot in all kinds of different styles. We don't really do a barrel age program, but short of that, we do pretty much everything else.
Interesting. Well, that all makes sense. The lager focus being those lower ABV drink multiples, especially if you are popping dog fanatics into a tap room.
Yep.
One and done is not a great strategy for that kind of customer, and finding ways to make them happy over multiple beers is great. And if it fits your brewer approach too, then even better. Well, I want to talk about this Scottish ale because it's a weird one. William Walrus is the name of it. And as we said, it's a double decocted Scottish ale, something of an ad hoc beer that you threw together in order to, for a whole bunch of other reasons, not necessarily thinking, hey, let's go make this a medal winning batch for this beer. And yet there you are employing some unusual or some techniques from other styles to make this beer in the most interesting way. And our next issue is our malt focused issue. So I'm particularly interested in this subject. I also love Scottish ale, and we keep doing, features in the magazine around it. Like every few years, we'll bring back the Scottish ale package and like talk about brewing Scottish ale. And one of these times, like, just like with our lager issues, eventually we're going to get the timing right, and it's going to happen. Scottish ale will become big again. I'm not. Rob, in some places it hasn't left. There are a lot of places in this country where I go and like Scottish ales are top seller. It is fascinating to see that, but it's also the beautiful thing about craft beer. It's not one thing. It's different things in different places for different kinds of people, and that's what makes it beautiful and unique. Anyway, I want to talk about the Scottish ale. Before we do that, take your brewing to the next level with AccuBrew's revolutionary fermentation monitoring system, now predicting specific gravity. With AccuBrew, you'll have precise control over the fermentation process and ensure consistent, high-quality results. Their cloud-based app and compact sensor work together to monitor specific gravity, fermentation activity, clarity, and temperature. AccuBrew is CIP ready and designed to stay out of your way. Their set-it-and-forget-it solution streamlines systems and processes, confirms consistency, and helps detect problems before they ruin a batch. Join the AccuBrew community today and experience 24/7 peace of mind. Visit accubrew.io to learn more. Also, ProBrew is excited to announce that they are currently featuring short lead times between 2 and 4 weeks for their in-stock ProFill rotary can fillers. These can fillers run at speeds between 100 and 600 plus cans per minute while achieving precise and consistent filling volumes not achievable by most inline and mobile fillers. For more information, fill out their contact form on www.probrew.com or email contactus@probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, brew your beer. And we all have busy lives these days and can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks the night before. ZBiotics is the answer we've all been looking for. ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Give ZBiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/beerandbrewing to get 15% off your first order when you use Beer and Brewing, all caps, Beer and Brewing, at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. ZBiotics is something I see more and more professional brewers tapping into ZBiotics.
I was just going to say, we could use some of that Sunday morning. Yeah, Sunday morning after GABF. Yeah, I don't know that completely dissolves all the sins of the tiki party, but I could have used anything while I was standing in the line at that Denver airport.
Some folks were telling me they come prepared, like buying ZBiotics by the case. Anyway, if you do that, you use that code Beer and Brewing, all caps, and might as well get 15% off, right? All right.
I'm gonna have to disconnect with you and get on that right now.
Okay, Rob, walk me through William Walrus, your Scottish style ale.
Okay, great. I should go ahead and mention that you may notice in the name, obviously, that there's Walrus. We have Metazoa, again, with being a dog park. A big part of our focus is animals, so we donate 5% of all of our proceeds to animal charities. I would imagine that I haven't checked the figure in a long time, but I would imagine that we're up, to date with the company over $200,000 donated to animal charities and organizations. So I would get killed if I did not plug that about Metazoa. So anyhow,
and that's cool though that the charitable approach with animal charities works its way even into your product naming strategy and creates a structure around that so that there's
absolutely. So every one of our beers absolutely. So you'll see it on all of our cans. There's animal illustrations and stuff like that. So it goes into everything that we do. So but specifically with William Walrus, that was a really fun and hilarious beer to make. That was one of those we had an open fermenter. We would have brewed it in February The production times are slow. Open fermenter needed to keep British yeast alive. And what do we brew? So naturally, we sat around on a Friday planning next week's production schedule. Me and a couple of our other brewers and cellar people, a couple beers, and decided that we wanted to brew something brown. And I had been wanting to use the name William Walrus, and so Scottish Ale made sense. So we go to take a look, formulating the recipe, and see that we don't really have any black malt for color. We don't have a lot of caramel malt to add malt depth. Then we said, fuck it, we've got a decoction vessel. So the building of this recipe ends up at that point becoming pretty simple. So we had some Crystal 10 and Crystal 60, but really, really low percentages. And so this is built out of 2-row and Munich malt. Again, we don't have any malt from the UK, as far as, like British pale malts or anything like that you typically see. So really that's the way that we drive, like that sort of nuttiness. Like we had some caramel malts, but, drive, and certainly for the color. So it's like 10 pounds in a 20-barrel batch of chocolate malt. But Scottish Ale fits with that. That's part of what I really love about Scottish Ale, is that it's got all those like nice toffee, nutty caramel notes, but really roast is not a part of it. I'm not a big roasty beer fan. Like when I do, I want it to be a stout or a Schwarz beer or just a coffee beer. So when you get into like brown ale, mild ale, things like that, those brown beers that have roast character, that doesn't really hit my sweet spot as much as Scottish Ale. So seemed like a perfect fit. We had a couple beers, threw together a recipe in about 30 minutes and shipped it off to next week and brewed it, and here we are. But that's I think the power of the decoction vessel, and you see that in like a lot of our amber and dark lagers. And I think that it just makes for a really nice, balanced, it's still, so it's clean and drinkable. That's a big part of the decoction, is not using a lot of caramel crystal malts. It's pretty well attenuated. It makes it really drinkable, really nice, really smooth. There's no acrid, roast bitterness or anything like that. So splash of Magnum, handful of Magnum at 60 minutes, and off we went. It was really a true fuck it beer, and it was a lot of fun and very cool to be rewarded for something that we put so little effort into. Outside of the brew day, of course.
That seems like a very flippant way to describe a double decoction process.
Of course. Outside of the brew day, but it's funny how that works, where it's, we've got beers that we've been brewing for years, tweaking and dialing and turning levers and knobs, and then you sit down on one Friday and have a couple beers and come away with a gold medal. So, it's how the world works, and that's the juxtaposition of
maybe a little bit more difficult than that. It seems like some of the constraints that you had as you were developing the recipe were actually, you turned from weaknesses into strengths. Obviously, when you have this kind of, limit in some of the specialty malts that you could pull from this, and they tended to be definitely on the lighter side, and you're solving problems, but you're doing it in different ways. And now, you're also thinking about how to accomplish this goal through double decoction, which you could also have done, in other ways through long boil. Obviously, you can't really, you're not on a direct fire system. You can't really
steam system. Those long boils. It's like, unless you're driving off DMS, they really don't do a lot. So one of the cons of this this beautiful engineering that they have out there these days.
Sure. Well, so your base is 2-row, and let's kind of walk through how much of some of the other like small specialty malts found their way into this.
So we're talking about Crystal 10, Crystal 60, and Biscuit, I believe, and again a handful of chocolate malt.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 10% total.
Okay.
Of specialty grain, maybe 15. And then just the base of 2-row in Munich.
And then what does your decoction process then look like?
Sure. So that is something that we definitely take into consideration a little bit more when we use specialty malt.
Right.
Anytime we get away from base grain, you worry about really extracting harsh tannins from darker grains. So
you don't want it to be husky. It needs to be like sweet and malty and not grainy.
Exactly. So we mash in 100% of the Munich malt and probably 90% or so of the 2-row, and then we run that mash program and we pull from that to run the decoction. So we don't want to run specialty grains. So once we've pulled for our second decoction, then we went ahead and mashed in the caramel malt, chocolate malt, and just run through our auger to wash it out the rest of the 2-row. So that's a big consideration. I want
like
to
your
say
check dark
the
lager decoction strategy, right?
Yeah. So I want to say exactly. I want to say that's the first time that we had done that. So again, that was a little bit. So I suppose a little bit of a hurdle. We've since brewed Dunkelweizen and Schwarz beer where we've done the same thing. But that was sort of a good proving ground and test for that process for us.
And then what kind of time is involved here? Through this double decoction. How long do you spend pulling that up? Into the decoction boil. What kind of there? Some lager brewers are going for very quick decoctions, really just to blow stuff apart. You're obviously trying to find, some character and some deeper malt character through this process.
Yeah, for us, we've really noticed, and I don't know. I mean, when you talk to somebody like Bill and Ashley from Bierstadt, it's like they have a system that was made in 1850 or whatever it is. So we have, this is all newly built, newly designed. We get really good efficiency on it. So we're really looking at 10-minute boils in our decoction vessel. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, it really is efficient. I mean, it ties directly in. It's all a new system designed to do this. So, we're looking at 10-minute decoctions. I mean, it adds time, obviously, but I would say the majority of that time is really just getting up from, wherever you start. Like, so for this, we didn't do an acid rest, but when you talk about your starting sack rest for a beer like this at 148 or 150 degrees, getting that up to boil is really the bulk of the added time. But even then, we're on a 20-barrel system. We pull roughly a third, getting 7, and it's not even 20 barrels of mash, right? So, we're looking at 4 barrels of mash slurry or somewhere around there for that to get it up to a boil. So really, we don't add a ton of time, and we're able to be pretty efficient, which makes it a lot easier to go ahead and do dumb shit like this when, it adds 45 minutes to a single brew day. Really not the end of the world. We're not doing 30-hour brew days like those psychos at Bierstadt or anything like that.
Sure. So with Scottish Ale, you need to maintain, what you're not trying to do is go perfectly dry. What you don't want to do is have a beer that's just going to like over attenuate and be harsh. Like it has to have some of that kind of malt sweetness, to it. I mean, that's just kind of par for the style. It needs to still be dry, but it also has to have, some of that sweet character. How did you think about balancing that as you were working out the kind of production and mash strategy for this?
Well, again, that's something that decoction does add, right? So it's not even, it does boost attenuation, but it also, you develop that sort of sweet, crackery, grainy malt character. So with our Munich malt, it really develops into a lot of that really sweet, bready malt character. So while you may see that attenuation, you get the impression of sweetness through decoction. So it sort of lends its hand to that. I mean, and then with the crystal malt, I think is just enough to keep it from turning out super dry. I mean, it was a beer that finished at 10-10, 2.5 Plato. So still a really well attenuated beer, but not, where we see, 1.5 Plato for something like Helles or Pilsner. And I think that probably just comes through the little bit of specialty malt that we put in there, and then a little bit of added impression of sweetness from the decoction. So really, the more I think about it, this decoction lends itself super well to this style. I highly recommend it.
So it's a rather straightforward decoction process. What, compared to say, a non-decocted mash of a similar mash bill, what do you think the double decoction process that you used is producing in terms of flavor that survives through into the end beer?
So certainly a big part of it is color in a beer like that. So
even with your steam process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So when we brew something like our Oktoberfest, I mean, so most of our, all of our lagers that's outside of Schwarz beer are 100% base malts. So we develop all that color for our Vienna, for our Oktoberfest, Dunkel, all those beers. 100% of the color is derived from decoction. So, you can use like a 10 Lovibond Munich, and that creates a beer that's relatively pale, but you decoct it 3 times like we do for our Dunkel, and you get a nice, dark, not quite dark brown, but a really deep brown color. So you certainly get a lot of the color development through that. And I just think with something like it just unlocks. I've really loved it with our Munich malt. It really unlocks a lot of like nutty toffee character that you get out of sort of the spectrum of caramel and crystal colored malts. When you, like I said, for this we use like C10, C60, but you run the gamut of C10, C45, C60, C90 or whatever to get a lot of different character out of it. And those sort of darker, when you get to 60, 90, you get a little bit of that like grape nut character. Things like that. Like I think we use Erex Munich, and like with that, you really unlock a lot of those malt, like deep, rich, malty characters through decoction. So it's just a massive part. I mean, it really is really very wild to experience sort of when you go from chewing it to, looking at something like how Munich shows itself in, a handful in an IPA or an amber, or something like that, and then when it goes through decoction, what it really offers and unlocks. I mean, it's a broad spectrum of those really, really cool malt character that you don't expect to get out of something like Munich malt.
We've got a theme going this year with brewers who are decocting non-lager styles. I had the same conversation with Decocted in Prague, where they're making decocted IPAs and pale ales that are
fuck it.
Hey,
yeah,
hey.
Why not?
My favorite beer that they decoct is a raspberry kettle sour, decocted raspberry kettle sour with some of the most beautiful foam you've ever seen. Of course, why not? Let's talk a hot side process for you. You mentioned you throw a little bit of Magnum in. How long do you then boil for, and are there any more hops that roll in through the hot side process?
Nope, that's it. I mean, a splash at 60 minutes. So this is a 60-minute boil. I mean, for us, we're still, I think, stuck back in the ways of 60 and 90-minute boils. I mean, we'll do, for something like Dunkel or whatever, if we, brew a Doppelbock, we might go 120 minutes, but we don't really see, again, because we're on a steam system, outside of volatilizing DMS, whenever we use Pilsner malt, we don't really see a lot of color character. I mean, it's just all consolidation of sugar at that point. So if we brew an imperial stout or something like that, we might boil longer. But for the most part, we're 60 and 90-minute boils. So for this would be a 60-minute boil, straight up just bittering addition for 15, 20 IBUs. Just after the decoction, this is as straightforward of a beer as as there is.
Any more hops in this beer at all?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no.
Just a bittering addition at the start, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah, no later addition, no later kettle. I mean, we do that for a lot of our beers. I'm a really big believer in, I think you'd be amazed at what, 10-minute addition of Hallertau Mittelfrüh does. And, we use Laurel American Noble hops a lot too. Those American Noble from YCH is a really cool product. So we use a lot of that in things like our cream ale, even, lighter beers like that just give it a little skosh of hop character. But that's not really what we were looking for in this, right? This is a really just for malt to stand on its own pretty much kind of beer. I mean, so really it's just enough bitterness to balance it out, make it, not too sweet. And I mean, that's all it's doing.
Wild. Anything, then, I mean, at the end of, knockout and into the, start of fermentation?
Absolutely not. Standard fermentation profile. I mean, we ride 68 to 72 degrees. We're big fans of Omega yeast. We use their British 5. It was, it's their sort of London Ale 3, whatever, their kind of really hazy IPA beer, but that yeast is amazing. We use it in a lot of our beers. It's the one that we found as far as what unlocks hazy IPA. That's what we need it to do, we use it for a lot of beers, but our hazy IPA is the one that sells. So it really has to unlock that beer, but it works, but it's the best beer I've seen, or the best yeast that I've seen to be the most versatile with other styles. And so it does really well for this. It still lends a gentle fruitiness. So, I mean, the light ester character that you want in sort of British and Scottish beer. So
how do you describe these esters? And how do they express differently in this Scottish ale versus, say, a hazy IPA?
So again, it's like hard to determine, because I think that you get so much of that through decoction that you wouldn't necessarily you would typically attribute to the yeast. Like I said, when you get that sort of grape nut character, I think that you get that it's not quite the deep plum and raisin, sort of dark fruit esters, but it's somewhere between, more like grapey. It depends how you use it. We'll go a little bit higher on certain styles, temperature wise, to unlock some of that esters. But it's very clean at lower temps, so it's in that dark fruit realm, but not quite the deeper ones that you get with Scottish ale yeasts. So I think that we were able to unlock that also through decoctions, getting some of that more mimicking Scottish ale yeast fruit character.
Interesting. Anything you mentioned temperature quickly, and it just blew right by me. Anything to how you approach temperature to massage those esters in one direction or another?
Where it's really higher or lower. I mean, that yeast is very straightforward. With if you get up into the 70s, you get a bit more ester production. When we brew something like our cream ale, it's like we keep it down around 66, very neutral, very clean. So it really is just making sure that you get up to 68, 70, 72
cream
degrees.
Ale with hazy, British yeast.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's it's so clean. We use the West Coast one, like their Chico strain for our West Coast IPA and things like that. And that just highlights hops really, really well. And I just don't think it's as good in our cream ale. I think that it adds a little bit of mouthfeel, sort of perceived mouthfeel just through the roundness of the yeast, and it's a little bit more neutral, where our Chico leans super dry. So, but at lower temperatures, you keep it neutral, avoid a lot of ester production, and so yeah.
How does that attenuate, say, differently in this double decocted Scottish ale versus your hazy IPA fermentation with the same kind of thing?
They end up pretty close to the same. Our hazy IPA ends up pretty low. I mean, you just notice that through hop creep. I mean, it's a beer. If we, with our fermentation temps, our mash regimen for a hazy IPA, if we never dry hopped it, that beer would finish at 5 Plato. But then we dry hop it, then it gets down to 2.5 to 3 Plato.
Oh man!
So yeah, we see a ton of that.
So you're using hop creep accomplishes the same thing that a decoction does in terms of finishing attenuation for these.
It's wild out here. Yeah, I don't know how in the world to keep a beer above 3 Plato with dry hopping. The way that we do. I mean, we dry hop late. We do sort of post terminal, ish, whatever. Day 7 typically dry hop on our hazy IPAs, and we still get that creep. And I mean, it'll take 2 weeks to finish out sometimes, and if you give it more time, it'll just keep going.
Some people would say that's not a problem, but sounds like
not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know that I want beers that finish at 5 Plato.
But it's interesting that you can, again, you're ending up in a similar place, even if you've got 2 different ways to get there. Whether that's enzymes coming in from hops, or whether that's an efficient mash regimen that's going to produce a more attenuatable, totally lost
attenuative,
attenuative, of beer that that you'll still end up in the same place.
Yeah, and that's and then again, going back to that mash regimen, it's like we hit 170, we hit a mash out, so we're very we try to be very particular about where we want these beers to land, and that's a big part, and I think an underrated part of being able to do stat mashing. So even our mash tun is jacketed, so every one of our beers goes through some sort of step, regardless of decoction. So that's a big part of those, is making sure you sort of freeze that conversion. Because even if you do a protein recet, in the 161.8 or whatever it is, you're still going to get a little bit of continued conversion there. So sort of getting to 170, locking that in, and making sure that you're not continuing your sack rest basically through that. Definitely helps ensure that you're not completely drying out beers so you don't want to.
Sure. Is there any thing to the way that you finished this the Scottish ale after fermentation, or I should say, using this yeast? Scottish ale typically isn't hazy in the way that IPA might be allowed to or celebrated for being murky and turbid.
Sure.
did you do anything to kind of promote flocculation in this one or kind of clean it up? I imagine if it's going to go in front of judges, it also, shouldn't necessarily look, brown and gross.
Yeah, God bless the centrifuge,
Okay.
So, but that yeast, again, it's bizarre for a yeast strain that is so heavily used in hazy IPAs that are meant to be very turbid, that it really drops very bright on its own if you give it enough time. Not always what brewers have. So, but even if you just use
Time, temperature,
biofine,
biofine. Okay.
I mean, biofine helps, but it'll drop extremely bright with biofine, or really with time if you have the time, which we never do. So, biofine, or in this case, centrifuge. Yep.
Oh, it's not the poor man's approach. It would be the rich man's approach to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the benefits of brewing 7,000 some odd barrels per year is that you can have some of the tools at your disposal. And
hey, time's the biggest money, though, isn't it? So, if we don't have the time, then time would be the rich man's approach, right?
For sure. Well, how do you, in terms of carbonation, how did you finish this beer? What were you thinking about? And what's your goal around it?
Well, I'm a big fan of bubbles, right? So I think that if you do a lot of reading, I'm sure that any sort of British, Scottish beer would tell you to carb these beers to like 2.2 or 2.3. Like that's garbage. This is carb to at least 2.6, 2.65, 2.7 in that range. I mean, we don't ever carbonate beers lower than that. Our hazy IPAs are around 2.4, but anything else 2.6 is about as low as we go.
Just for drinkability?
Yeah, big fan of bubbles. I mean, who doesn't love bubbles? I think, unless you're looking at a beer to be, extremely, almost cloying, I think that, again, it's just an element that sort of goes back to our ethos of really making drinkable beers that are drinkable in quantity. I don't like drinking a beer that doesn't have anything that brings me back for a next sip. So I think certainly with this, a lack of bitterness leaves, you have to make that up some way, in my mind, of that bringing you back to a next sip quality. And for this beer particularly, that would be through carbonation.
A little bit of that carbonic acid helps create some of that impression of bitterness then?
Yeah, it just, that carbonic acid has like a little bit of a, almost a cleansing of the palate sort of effect. Anytime that you have a beer that doesn't have that cleansing effect, it just, 1 ounce is good for me. So
cool.
Yeah.
Anything else to this crazy double decocted Scottish ale?
Nah, just shout out to the team for hanging out with me on a Friday and drinking a couple beers and coming up with something real fun. It's all about the decoction on this beer. That's what everybody needs to know and understand.
Interesting. Well, let's change gears and talk about some of your other Metazoa medal-winning beers. Before we do that, you like wildly aromatic IPAs and tropical lagers? Good thing. Omega designed thiolized yeast for just that reason. Thiolized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. And wait, there's more. Omega yeast makes yeast to order with a consistent 1-week lead time, ensuring peak freshness and reliability. Also, who doesn't love free samples? The Perfect Puree is offering a free sample box of their frozen fruit purees, concentrates, and blends to professional brewers. Picked at the peak of ripeness, their fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. Explore classics from red raspberry and blood orange to unique fruit juice blends such as Yuzu Lux Sour. Choose from 40 plus flavors and build a free sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Complimentary to professionals only. And this episode is brought to you by Yakima Chief Hops. The 7th annual Pink Boots blend is now available for pre-order. $3 of every pound of the Pink Boots blend purchased will be donated to the Pink Boots Society, a nonprofit organization that supports women and non-binary individuals in the fermented and alcoholic beverage industry through education. Place your orders from Yakima Chief Hops and secure your volume of this limited blend for your Pink Boots collaboration brew day on March 8th, International Women's Day. Learn more at www.yakimachief.com/pink-boots-blend. All right, Rob, let's talk about some of your past medal-winning beers. I think this is beer number 10 that you've won a GABF medal for. You've probably
I believe so.
Yeah, maybe 5 World Beer Cup medals or something around those lines.
Yep, I know we've got 5 World Beer Cup. Yep.
Yeah. So what do you win for? What's your next winningest beer?
We've done really well with saisons over the years. So we've won for, and this is where I got to plug old Nick Betzner. He left the company, allowed me to step into his shoes as director of brewing operations. He's at Blacktooth Brewing Company. He's at their brewing at their tap room in Cheyenne, Wyoming, not too far from you. So he's.
So you're saying I should go up and visit Nick then?
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, pay him a visit. Yep. So he is a saison wizard. Yeah. So
that is actually where I recorded the podcast episode with Eric Toft of Shinram. Because he's from Cheyenne, and we were right there in the Cheyenne Blacktooth location.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, he's the man. You'd enjoy chatting with him. But yeah, great saison brewer. So yeah, we've won several medals.
They won a medal for their cream ale this year too, didn't they?
They won 2 medals this year. Yeah, we sat with them for the ceremony. We had a good time. So they won with they were both, it's like 1902 and 1882 or something like that, whatever. So I think a barrel aged beer, and then I think they're light lager, I want to say.
Cool.
But yeah, so these were his beers for sure. So Meadowlark, our standard saison. Klipspringer is a hoppy saison. Basically the same recipe, dry hopped with, we use a little bit more Centennial than Saaz on the hot side, and then dry hopped with Citra, about a pound per barrel, and then Go Apricot is an apricot saison. So all of those have won medals at either GABF or World Beer Cup.
Well, let's. What do you think? What are some of the approaches that you take that help optimize these beers for winning medals in the way that they do?
So a big part of that is stay out of the way. Those are yeast forward beers. So to start with a good yeast, we use Omega Saisonstein's Monster, which is the worst name in the history of yeast, but it's a hybrid between their Belgian and French saison strains. So you get a little bit of a little bit fruitier Belgian yeast character, Belgian saison character, a little bit of that more peppery phenolic French saison character, and kind of staying out of the way of that. I think a big thing on the hot side for Meadowlark, the standard saison in particular, is using a large volume of Saaz hops throughout the boil. That's sort of the almost old your classic sort of lager brewing. Like Pilsner Kolsch additions, 60, 45, 30, 15 to whatever, we're talking 4 hop additions throughout that beer, and you sort of layer in different. So you layer in different qualities of bitterness, so that 60 minute is that, you're boiling vegetal matter for longer, right? So that's where you get a little bit more astringent polyphenol character. Those middle additions, there's a little bit softer and more round bitterness, which I'm a big fan of those for IPAs. As well, sort of that mid, 30-minute addition. And then obviously the later boil you get, you'll still pick up a little bit of bitterness, but a little bit more, aroma, flavor contributions there towards the end of the boil. And then I think you just add in that volume of hops. You get a lot of almost like creamy vanilla sort of characteristic, and I don't know if that's specifically with that Belgian yeast that it converts into vanillin or something like that. I'm going to start making shit up that I don't really know what I'm talking about, but you get this like creamy mouthfeel character from that sort of volume of hop addition in a beer like that. That can really only be achieved through, those low alpha. Our Saaz is like 3 alpha acid, so it's still a beer that finishes. It's fairly bitter.
Even lower
it's
next 25.
Year. yeah, no kidding. It was perfect, really. I don't think that's what the farmers want, but It's like for me, I'm like, hell yeah.
Right,
right. It's good. Yeah, it's going to cost $2 more a pound, and I'm going to have to use twice as much. But goddamn, is that going to make a good saison next year? So this is a beer that still finishes fairly bitter. It's only 25 or 30 IBUs, but it's so dry. Finishing very close to 0 Plato. So
I can see it being interesting having some of that kind of vanilla will create an impression of more sweetness or body despite that kind of dryness. And I could see that being a benefit in something that was still that dry.
It's just interesting. I think that's a lot of times. I think that's part of.
Where do you get Saaz that comes across as vanilla? I'm curious about that.
So again, it's not this. It's like this almost. I should say it almost has the same effect of vanilla, like where it has that sort of that awkward mouthfeel thing where you're like, this is not actually sweet, but it like gives this impression of sweetness.
Sure.
So yeah, it's that. Yeah, and I think that is all part of again, let me just stop on trying to get scientific with you. Like I know what the fuck I'm talking about. So yeah, but it just gives this really rounding mouthfeel and light vanilla character. Vanillin is a hop oil, so I don't know if there's some sort of conversion in there that with these Saaz hops during fermentation or
what volume of Saaz hops gets you there?
It'd be I'd have to look back at old recipe sheets, but I mean we're talking 1.5 pounds per barrel on the hot side, I would guess. But,
and a pretty decent, calculated IBUs then that comes out of that, or for the most part, even though these are low ABV or low. I mean, it's low. So alpha.
You still, yeah. I mean, you still, it's not like you're using, 13, 14 alpha, Citra or whatever. So, but we're still getting 25 probably IBUs out of there.
Cranking a bunch of IBUs with a whole bunch of low alpha hops. That's
100% of that cost is from using just way too much European hop.
And then I'm sure it's great in terms of liquid loss through the process too. But
that's whatever.
Sure. Let's talk about fermentation for your these medal winning saisons then too, because obviously, especially when it comes to saison, that's a big piece of it. Although also grain and grist is another big piece of the saison equation. I'm just flipping all out of order here. I'm going totally non-linear. Yeah, let's talk about fermentation for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, the grain's pretty straightforward. Hops are pretty straightforward. I mean, it's mostly a smash beer. I think, there's, 7% wheat or something along those lines in it. So the grist bill's pretty straightforward. Hops are pretty straightforward.
Are you using Pilsner malt or?
Yeah, yep. And then even really fermentation's pretty straightforward. I think that, and this is a misconception that I even had, that, you need to go really hot with saisons. I don't necessarily think that that's the case anymore. So we drive a lot of it through hanging out in the mid-70s.
Jeremy from Protagonist will argue with you about that point.
Yeah, but that's great. I mean, I think it depends what you want. Sure. I mean, I've brewed beers like that, and I think that it certainly adds an element of, I mean, if you really want a lot of that peppery character, I mean, I think that it's important to use probably specifically a French saison yeast, and definitely make sure it hangs out above, in the low 80s at least. I mean, I don't know what the hell he would, what he would say. Is it like, does he say like 85 or something insane like that?
You'll have to listen to the episode, my friend.
Oh gosh. Yeah. All right. Text me the episode number. I'll get back to it.
Sure.
But yeah, so we hang around in the low to mid 70s. I mean, we don't really go too high with it. That yeast performs well. Give it a long time. That yeast will never stop attenuating. I mean, it'll pass diacetyl after 3 days, and it'll keep fermenting for 3 weeks. So, so that thing, it gets bone dry. It has plenty of,
and you give it the time to just finish its thing out.
Yeah, those beers are a pain in the ass. I mean, the yeast flocks like shit. It takes forever to attenuate, but I mean, it just produces some really awesome beers. So again, I think it's sometimes with beers like that, there's a lot of times that people want to get away and they want a yeast that's easier to work with. They want something that flocks better. They want something that, attenuates quicker. They want something, they want to produce an 8-day saison or whatever. For us, it's like the beer takes 4 or 5 weeks. It's a pain in the ass, but it gives us the beer that we want. So
use a Diastaticus saison strain, or?
Yep. So that's fun. That's, we're talking, replacing soft parts afterwards, so it's all around. It's a pain in the ass. And if we want to brew successive beers, it might take us 3 or 4 days to harvest the yeast off of it because it flocculates so poorly, which again, I think contributes to the character. I mean, I think that, you end up leaving yeast in suspension. That just turns into more character down the road, really. So it ages well, hopefully not explosively well. We avoid putting things like that into cans. But even, I mean, hell, we've had, that yeast, we've had kegs sitting in the cooler for a couple of months, and you're like, man, this boy's pouring foamy. So, yeah, it's amazing how strong that yeast is. That's
sure.
Yeah, the Diastaticus is powerful.
It is powerful stuff, for sure. Any other beers that you're particularly proud of your Metazoa winning medals for?
This year we won a bronze for our Maibach. That was, personally for me, a first a lager win. So that's fun, especially with the, the new sort of, prior to opening up this new production facility, it's like decoction was not something that I ever done. Lagering tanks are something I've never used. So to be able to, and really not a lot of experience even brewing lagers in general. So to be able to bring that around to a metal is really cool. But I'd say we won our Hazy IPA Wicked Possum, won a bronze medal in 2020. So I mean that's a pretty big deal.
Tough category to win in.
Yeah. A total accident that we ended up. We had a beer that just didn't turn out well, and it was like, well, what the fuck else do we have to send? And that was the one last entry, biggest category. Hey, what do you know?
You have a flippant way of addressing all of this, as if there's no, as if these things just happen. But I like that. I love you're playing it down, Rob.
I think if you enter these competitions enough, you understand how challenging it is to win medals. And not that, like, I don't mean that in like a, hey, look at us, we've won medals, even though it's hard.
Right.
I think it's the subjectivity that goes into it. Any beer, any day, right? It's no bad beers are winning medals, but lots of good beers aren't winning medals, So it's cool. It's a great honor. Obviously, it's a lot of fun. Winning medals is cool. It's a big thing in the industry. But I think if you've entered competitions for long enough, you understand how little it means. And I don't mean to, again, say that like that sounds flippant and that sounds kind of shitty or whatever. But I think that you understand that it's like, you look at a brewery like Bell's that's not like cranking out medals, and it's just like, all right, are you going to tell me that Two Hearted isn't fucking awesome? Are you going to tell me that they're not making world-class beers and they've won 4 medals in 30 years? I look at something like that and it tells me exactly what these medals mean. And, we're winning for Scottish ales over here. Okay.
Sure. Well, I think there's an element of, on any given Saturday morning, right? That,
for sure.
The level of competition has significantly increased, and the quality of beer the brewers are producing and submitting, to competitions like the World Beer Cup and the Great American Beer Festival are absolutely the best that they've ever been. And it's hard to, we shouldn't discount that whatsoever. And that high level of quality means that there probably is some, there's the potential for, chaos and arbitrariness to kind of come in, that it's hard. Now what that also says is that brewers that consistently win those, have found ways to consistently win medals in this highly competitive environment, are somehow, have found ways to, overcome some of the chaos in that system. That it is, there's certainly that case to be said that it's not as, winning once is one thing, but winning, 5 or 10 is like the odds are against you if you're trying to claim that these are random dice rolls, that achieving that kind of thing can be harder. And it certainly speaks to building a culture of quality. And maybe that's where we should kind of wrap this up on. What is it about Metazoa and your approach to overall quality that you think, what are some of the small things that you all focus on that you think in the larger picture make big differences? What are some of these little things that you all are very particular about, that tend to then create this kind of ongoing culture of quality?
That's everything, right? If you don't care about everything, you don't care about anything. So I think that's really big. We're big on process. I mean, I'm not an artist. I'm not a genius, as you probably discovered over the last hour or so, and Nick either. I mean, we always laugh that we're the 2 biggest dipshits winning medals out here. And so, it's really about practice. That was a big thing that I learned at Sun King. I mean, it's amazing when you go to a brewery like that for their side. I mean, they're 30,000 barrels, but that's a pretty small brewery in the grand scheme of things. And their quality and consistency is remarkable. And you want to talk about breweries just constantly being on stage. They're definitely one of them over the years. And so I think taking that sort of disciplined approach to, like, hey, you wear gloves, when you do stuff. Hey, it's just whatever. That's one little thing, it's like if a blow off bucket's dirty, you take it off and you clean it. I think that it just comes down to everything, right? Like your DO minimization is huge. I mean, I think that you probably heard a number of brewers say that GABF and World Beer Cup, you go to those big national and international competitions. It's as much a packaging competition as it is a beer competition. So that's even down to, that's all the way from the day before you brew when you're sanitizing the tank, that you're wearing gloves and you're spraying shit with isopropyl and sanitizing while cleaning well before you sanitize, yeast management, it's, all the way down to the very end, a couple days before we send our beers out, the bottling practice. We hand bottle everything, which is annoying. We have a CFT Comac line that gets no DO pickup, but it's not 2 DO pickup. Like I've made the mistake of running our hand bottled beers through our DO meter, and it's like I can't unseat 2. So I mean, there's 2 ppb when I hand bottle. It's like those are things that it just comes down to every detail, I think. So that's sort of all the way through the brewing practice, and sort of those are the practices we take on a day-to-day basis in the brewery. And then you just kind of got to take the same approach when it comes down to competition. And I think a big part of that is that you need to be honest with yourself as you're going to enter beers into competitions. What beers have a chance? Do your beers hit within style guidelines? Do you go to people for constructive criticism? That you have people that will be honest with you and that you'll actually listen to them and believe them when they give you their honest opinion. It's way too much that goes into it, But I think that's what it takes to have any level of sustained success on the competition circuit. Is you kind of have to be all in, because it's a lot of money. I mean, I'd be doing, I don't pay for these things. I'd be doing our owners a disservice if I didn't take all that into consideration when you're spending $180 a pop or whatever it is, and we send somebody to drive these beers out to Denver. It's a lot of money that goes into it. So,
man, yeah, I mean, and it is a marketing expense. Of course, you spend this, and creates stories locally, creates an idea of quality that your own consumers affix to the idea of the Metazoa brand. Generates organic news stories, potentially in local media and whatnot. And of course, here we are having a conversation.
And look at this
right now
on the international powerhouse that is Craft Beer Brewing Podcast.
Something like that.
Absolutely,
something like that.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. But yeah, that's it's something that if you got to take pride in it. You got to take pride in your work. Right. That's just the biggest thing. It's like if I have people that show up to the brewery and don't take pride in what they're doing, then they're not going to be around for very long, which has never been a problem, But that's sort of what I tell everybody coming in. It's like, this job sucks. You'll be held to a high standard, and that's what I expect. That's what everybody expects. Like, that's just, this is a job. I think that's a big problem in the industry, is that people think it's cool to be a brewer. Coolest part about being a brewer is telling your friends that you're a brewer. Pretty much everything else sucks, and act accordingly. This is your job. This is your career. Take it seriously, just like you would if you were an accountant or a lawyer. Yeah,
fair. So, what's the biggest challenge, the biggest project on your horizon, your near term, next year or two? What's one big thing that you're trying to figure out, tackle, or crack the nut on?
Not a lot for me. I think it's going to be business as usual for the most part on the brewing team. I mean, we've got a really good lineup of core beers. I mean, we're going to go through a little bit of a shakeup on a couple of recipes, but I mean, minor. It's like minor shakeups become big details when you look at hop contracts and things like that. But really, there's not a ton that we're doing on. I mean, we're expanding into new states, and we're launching 12-ounce. Actually, tomorrow will be our first 12-ounce canning run. So sort of expanding SKUs through that way. No big overhaul, no big projects on our end. It's really about sustaining and maintaining growth. I mean, we've been fortunate to grow even through the pandemic. So we're, going to launch in a couple new states coming up soon. So that's really just continuing to grow the business. I mean, look at, for me, it's like I'm a spreadsheet brewer now. So it's fun and different and interesting ways and challenging in different ways. So, I mean, it's really, I look at dollars per barrel and how do I get that number down without sacrificing quality and things like that, So we look at building efficiencies is really where my mind is at moving forward. And it's fun, it's interesting, and it makes me want to, dive off the roof sometimes because it's painful in a lot of ways. But that's really my big focus moving forward, is making sure that you don't have drift. That's always a constant as you grow, making sure that you don't get away from sort of the core values and what that beer turns out, in the glass. Make sure that drinking experience stays the same even through growth and chaos.
I think that is a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, and reliability with 24/7 service and support. BSG invites you to try HS Grove, the newest from their Hop Solutions line. Try Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends in your next craft beverage. AccuBrew helps you detect problems before they ruin a batch. ProBrew has rotary can fillers in stock with a 2 to 4 week lead time. Z-Biotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Omega stylized yeast bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. If you're a pro brewer, request your free samples today from Perfect Puree, and $3 per pound ordered of the YCH Pink Boots blend will be donated directly to the Pink Boots Society. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button. We depend on your subscriptions to keep this entire machine rolling so we can bring great podcast conversations to you and great magazine issues for both our Brewing Industry Guide and Craft Beer and Brewing. Rob, if people want to learn more about Metazoa, what you do, try your beer, taste it in the tap room, et cetera, where do they find you all?
Yeah, well, you can find us in Indianapolis. That's always the best way, right? Go drink draft beer from the source. That's number one. We're at 140 South College, Indianapolis,
CBC
Indiana.
2025.
Hey, there you go.
There, right?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, that'll be a good time. Looking forward to probably seeing and pouring beers for a lot of your listeners, if I had to guess. I think it's metazoabrewing.com. I don't know if you Google Metazoa Brewing Company, that'll pop up. I'm sure that's Metazoa Brewing Co. on all social media. Follow us. Give us a follow if you want to see a lot of pictures of dogs. Yep.
Well, there you go.
All the doggo left.
Rob, it's been wonderful talking with you about brewing double decocted Scottish ale and
Yes.
taking your other weird technical approaches that you seem to think are no big deal, even though they win medals and can continue to win medals. Thanks for talking to me for the podcast.
I really appreciate it, Jamie. Long-time listener, first-time caller, so this has been fun. I really appreciate you.
Well, cheers.
All right, cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.